Creating a purchase order. This will be a long video, so get comfortable. This is also a new and revised version of the previous video I had here, so you may notice some changes if you are rewatching. All purchases of any dollar amount must begin with the purchase order process. You cannot skip this step. This step is comparable to filling out a standard 65 form before making a purchase. You enter all the data for the purchase, vendor, buyer, address, dates, items, prices, justification, and CalSTARS coding. You check some boxes, cross your T's and dot your I's, and then you get it approved by your chief or other supervisor and go make the purchase. Making a Fiscal purchase order is the same thing, except it's online and the data you enter is a little different. Some steps are easier and some are more complicated. This video will walk you through making a basic purchase order completely from scratch. I will be making a goods purchase with this purchase order. Making a service purchase order is quite similar, and you should watch this video first, but another video points out the differences. This video will also be for a purchase not made by CalCard. There's an extra step if you want to pay by CalCard, and I made another video that covers it. There is also the option in Fiscal to copy someone else's purchase order and make a few changes to suit your own purchase, but this video will show you how to do it all yourself. In this example, I will set up a purchase order for Westside Ace Hardware in Santa Cruz. I will not be paying with CalCard in this example. I will be buying 2 items, some spackle and some nylon rope. In this case, I will be charging the whole amount to a single PCA. A separate video will cover how to split code in Fiscal. Before I begin the purchase order, I must check that Westside Ace Hardware at the address in Santa Cruz where I'm going to buy is an approved supplier in Fiscal and is open for ordering. See the video on verifying suppliers if you need guidance with that process. I've checked already and the supplier is good to go. I also know the item prices for the 2 items that I plan to buy. I must also keep in mind that Fiscal is merely a method of recording my purchase. All the procedures and regulations we had before Fiscal about prior approvals, prohibited items, times we need PIA waivers, and procurement methods still exist. Any of those documents I needed before Fiscal happened, I still need, including a CAL FIRE 93 were this a service purchase. For example, if I am buying some lockers and I need something different from what PIA produces, I must complete a PIA waiver and get it approved before I begin the PO. In fact, I will need to scan it to PDF format and attach it to the PO I create, because those who approve my PO will need to see it. Once I am prepared, I log into Fiscal to begin creating my purchase order. Using the main menu, go to Purchasing. If you ever can't find something, click these arrows. It will resort by alphabetical order. Purchasing, purchase order, and add update POs. You may want to save this page to your Fiscal favorites, so it's easy to get to every time you want to make a purchase order. To save it, go to your favorites, click Add to Favorites, and follow the prompt to save it. On the Add a New Value tab, don't touch either of these numbers. Just click Add. This page opens. This is the interface through which you will create your purchase order, but during the process you'll be taken to several other sub-pages. For this basic PO, just follow what I do, and don't worry about anything I don't touch. We'll work first in this section called Header. Begin with the date. This should be today's date, the day you're making the purchase order, not the day you're making the purchase. You should be making the purchase order before you make the purchase. It will default to today's date. Going down the column to Supplier and Supplier ID. Fill in either one of these and the other will fill too. If you know the supplier ID, just type it in. Otherwise, click either magnifying glass to search for your supplier. It is very important to choose the correct supplier, the one you will buy from, at the correct address. If you don't, your purchase order will be denied or claim cut. Next is the buyer. This defaults to the person logged into Fiscal and filling out the form. Everyone has a unique buyer ID, and it will appear here along with your name. If you are the person filling out the purchase order and you will make the purchase, you don't change this. However, perhaps I have been asked to make this purchase order for someone else, and I will not do the actual buying. The person who will make the purchase must appear in this field. I can click the magnifying glass and search for any person in CAL FIRE. Each purchase order is locked to a single buyer, so if I make a purchase order and specify that John Smith will make the purchase, but then John gets sick and can't do it, Jane Doe can't just step in and use his purchase order instead. Another consequence of making a purchase order for a different buyer is this. If there's a problem with this purchase order and it gets denied, the buyer I specify will get the notice that it's denied, not me, the creator. Then John Smith will have to tell me, hey, that purchase order was denied, can you fix it? I won't know about it otherwise. The best practice is to make all your own purchase orders. Move to the right-hand column. Acquisition type. This is an easy one that you've been specifying in the past every time you made a purchase by using a standard 65 or a CAL FIRE 93. Goods or service. Click on the magnifying glass and you'll see 6 options. Very likely the only 2 you will ever use are non-IT goods or non-IT services. Since I'm buying spackle and rope, I choose non-IT goods. The next field is acquisition method. This exists on the standard 65 form as well. It's this section here, procurement method, where you choose between competitive, leveraged, and these other options. So this should not be unfamiliar to you. Here it's just called acquisition method instead. If you click on the magnifying glass, you'll see you have many more choices than before, but you're not likely to ever use more than a few. For my purchase, I select fair and reasonable competitive. You must select the acquisition method you are using for your particular purchase. DGS billing code is the next field to look at. This number is on your standard 65 and CAL FIRE 93 as well. It's here near the top, called agency billing code. You might not have ever noticed it before. Here are CZU's codes. Just as you normally would, think of who is paying for your purchase. What coding would you put? For my example, this purchase will come out of the budget for $1,700, so I will enter 013117 in this field. You could also click on this magnifying glass and look up a list of all of the billing codes in CAL FIRE, but this isn't very useful because it doesn't tell you what unit these codes go to. So you'll need to know this before you log in to make your purchase order. Next is this PO reference field. Different units are handling this field differently, but technically it is optional. You may enter a legacy document number here if you want, such as a code CZU might use would be something like 1PA8V123. CZU has no firm direction at this time with what to put in this field, so it's up to you. You can leave it blank if you want. That's what I'll do this time. Now click the header details link and a pop-up will open. You only need to change one item, the billing location. It does not default to CZU. If for CZU headquarters, you can just remove the last 3 items and put 162. And then click OK. If you want the camp or forest address, you can click on this magnifying glass and search for it instead. I've found that changing the description to contains and putting CZU will turn up all of the addresses for all of our stations and locations in CZU. But for this purchase, I'll leave it as 162, which is CZU's headquarters in Felton. And then click OK. Click on the next link down, called PO Defaults, and another pop-up will open. Here are some important options, which appear for the coding of your purchase. It is complex, especially the first time, so I'll go through it one step at a time. Fiscal calls coding chart fields now. We used to call it CalSTARS coding. The video about split coding will go into this in more detail, but for this video, I'll introduce the basics. If you have a purchase where all your items will have the same coding as I do in this example, the PO Defaults page that I just showed you can be a big time saver. Every item you buy must have its own line of chart fields coding. This is different than what we have done before, where we put lines of coding, one or more, for the entire purchase. For example, here at the bottom of the 65, you see there's just one line of coding, even though 4 items were purchased. I am sure that you have already realized that this change can increase the workload per purchase immensely. Imagine that you've bought 10 new tools for the shop. In the past, we could do one line of coding for the whole purchase and be done. Now, all 10 of those tools will have its own line. If there is any split coding involved, all 10 of those items might have 2 or more lines each. That could mean 20 lines of code, 30, 40, or more, depending on what you bought and where it's getting charged. As if this weren't enough, the number of codes per line has changed as well. In the past, we did 4, fiscal year, index, object, and PCA, plus the dollar amount, and maybe an incident number too. With Fiscal, you will now be entering at least 7 codes per line, not counting the entry of the itemization, such as item description, quantity, and price. This sounds overwhelming, but there are ways to make it easier, and the PO Defaults box is one of them. There, you can set the coding for all items in your purchase, if they all have the same coding, so that you don't have to enter them one at a time. Here's how. I have 2 items in my example, and the coding for them will be identical, so I can enter one line of coding here for both items, and it will auto-populate when we get to the itemization section. Even if you have a purchase where perhaps your items have different object codes, but everything else is the same, you can enter everything except the object code here, and only have to enter the object code for each item later. To make any of this work, I must click Override. Now I'll take you down the page one field at a time. This line section gives you a category field. You can skip this now and enter it later, but if you bought only one item, or you bought several of the same kind of item, for example, Wildland gloves in sizes small, medium, and large, you can put in the category field now and not have to enter it for every item later. Although I have observed inconsistent transferring of these 2 items to the itemized section, so always check to make sure it worked. This category code is a number from an immense list of United Nations Standard Products and Services codes. The list contains codes for everything from live pheasants to tractor tires, everything you could possibly buy, and you must pick codes for your items. There are a few ways you can do this. The Fiscal option is to click this magnifying glass. You'll see this list starts out with every possible animal on the planet, but chances are you're not buying any of them. Change the description to contains and start guessing. Turning up things like rope will turn up every possible type of rope that is generated on planet Earth, so it can be a little difficult. There is also a website provided by the Department of General Services that is a bit easier to use than the Fiscal search box. Here's the web address for it. You can also find a short list of commonly used UNSPSC codes on the CZU portal page where you found the link to this video. It hasn't been loaded up yet, but pretty soon it will appear among all of these tab options. Since I bought two different types of items that will have different category codes, I will wait and enter this code later. Beside it is the unit of measurement box. If all your items came in each pack or box, etc., you can select that unit of measurement here. Both items that I bought come by the each, so I will enter EA here. You can look up other options by clicking this magnifying glass. Next down the page is the Schedule section. You don't need to touch anything here except the Ship To field. Again, it defaults to Sacramento, but my spackle and rope are not going to Sacramento. Click the magnifying glass and search for the Ship To location of your purchase, the same way you would put your station address as the Ship To location on a standard 65, if that's where the item is going, whether there will be actual shipping involved or not. If I say this is for Big Creek Station, I'll change the description to contains, put in CZU, click look up, and then I can choose from all of my stations. I can locate Big Creek and click on it. And now Big Creek's code will appear here. Now go to this distribution section, the chart fields tab. Here is where you can enter coding for all items in your purchase. I will be entering codes for my example purchase of spackle and some rope. My items will have the same coding. They will both be charged 100% to 02350 and use the same object code. There are some fields here where we won't enter anything. You can skip %, leave GL unit alone, it needs to say 3540, and skip entry event. Use this horizontal slide bar to move along the lines of coding. Now there are 3 codes that link up to our PCA: a prop ref, fund, and program. These numbers will change depending on what PCA you're charging to. Here is a sample of what these codes look like. But you don't need to memorize these. In Fiscal is a function called speed charts, and it will keep track of these codes for you. Under this magnifying glass, I locate the fiscal year and PCA of my purchase, 02350-18. I can also search for it to go a bit quicker if I want. 02350-18. I click on it, and Fiscal will enter these codes for me, along with this ENY code, which is the fiscal year, just like you'd put on your standard 65 under FY. But Fiscal uses all 4 numbers, not just the last 2. So it shows 2018, not 18. Here's a code you'll have to enter yourself: account. Account is the new term for object code. Our old codes no longer work. There is a 13-page PDF that translates our old 3-number codes to the new ones, which are 7, I think, code numbers long. You can find this PDF also on the CZU portal page where you found the link for this video. I would have used 357 as the object code for these items. I can find it On page 4, the new code is 5324150. So I will enter that on the Fiscal page. You may notice there are some alt accounts here in this next column over. Alt account will fill in for you, but some items, like this, have several alt accounts to choose from. Another example being diesel and gas, just as it used to have a 0.01 or a 0.02. Confirm using this chart that you have the correct alt account. All of these new codes ensure that the money you're spending comes out of the right part of the budget. If you get these numbers wrong, either you'll be spending money you shouldn't, or the purchase order will get denied because the numbers you entered do not match a budget we have access to. Now scroll to the right. There are 2 more fields to fill in. You can skip most of these until you get to reporting structure. This is the new term for index, and we have slightly new codes for it. Here are the codes CZU will use. You can see they start with 3540, which is CAL FIRE's number, and end with our good old 1700, but with a 2 if you're in the forest, 3 if you're in the camp, and 1 if you're neither. I enter 35401701. Because this is not a camp or forest purchase. The last field to fill in is a service location, which is the PCA. It's called service location now, but it's still our good old familiar PCAs that go there. If you used the speed chart function, that should be filled in for you, but just double check to make sure it's there. I am now done with this PO defaults pop-up. Remember, everything you enter here will get applied to all your items, but only if you click Override. You can change the data later, kind of overriding your override, or add data when we look at the items individually. When you're done, click OK. It's going to ask you because you changed the ship to address. We don't want it going to Sacramento headquarters. I want it going to Big Creek, so I changed it. It just wants to be sure that I'm sure about this. So I click OK. Time for another link. Go to Add Comments and Attachments, and you get another pop-up. You will enter at least 2 comments here for a goods purchase. The first is your justification, also called state purpose, which you always put on your standard 65 as well. Type in the box explaining what these items will be used for and why you need them. Please explain sufficiently and professionally. Then check the box for approval justification. You'll need a second comment box if you're making a goods purchase, so click on the plus sign. You'll see it changes now that you're on comment 2 of 2. Now you'll enter the general provisions verbiage. Click the Use Standard Comments link. In this pop-up, enter STW for statewide in the comment type box. The last time I made this video, the letters NIT in the comment ID box seemed to turn up the general provisions, but lately it seems to have changed. Now I'm using PANI. You can always click refresh to get Fiscal to pay attention to what you've just entered. I see that general provisions, that's what I want, is popping up here, the same as you used to put on a standard 65. Just be sure that you have the right comment before you click OK. And then it will appear here in the box. There are other occasions when you might use standard comments. There are standard comments specific to CAL FIRE and to other departments. You can explore them by clicking on the magnifying glasses in the Use Standard Comments pop-up. But for now, I am just entering the general provisions. I click OK when done. Back on the main page, there is another link, Add Reportable Attachment, that you might use someday. Add Reportable Attachment will give you a place to attach any required documents you have for this purchase, such as a PIA waiver and other things, but only the ones that you see here on this list. You have to select what type of document you're uploading before you upload it. If what you want to upload does not appear on this list, then you will have to add it under the ordinary Add Comments and Attachments link. Today, I don't have any of those forms, so I leave this box alone. Moving down the page, I reach the Car Reportable dropdown. Just select Yes, and then when this pops up, select No. Unless you're using subcontractors for your purchase. In that case, you would click Yes instead. Now you've reached the itemization section, called here the Lines section. Here I enter the items I'm buying. This item field is only for PIA items, so I skip it. In description, I write what I'm buying, the same way I would on a standard 65. If this is the item I'm buying, I can just copy and paste it right into the description field. I enter the quantity next. Let's say I'm buying 2 of these. I thought I entered unit of measurement back up in the PO defaults box, but it hasn't transferred it for me, so I enter it again here. I didn't enter the category in the PO defaults section, so I must choose it here. I had some difficulty finding an appropriate category. I used the DGS website and came up with this one. Add the individual item price of each item. My item is $9.99. I don't need to enter $9.99 times 2. I just enter $9.99 and Fiscal will do the math for me. Click on this Add EPP/SABRC link if you have purchased an item that is part of the State Agency Buy Recycled campaign or the Environmentally Preferable Purchasing campaign. If you have purchased an item like that, you have to enter your relevant data here. My purchase is neither of those, so I leave everything blank. I don't need to use this box. Next, click this icon that looks like a red and white square with a clock on it. It's called the schedule icon and will open a new page. If you didn't set the ship to location in the PO defaults pop-up, set it here to set the location the goods will go to. If you have any miscellaneous charges associated with this item, such as installation or fuel taxes in the case of gas and diesel, you can click this green item to enter them. But I don't have any, so I don't use this box. The next icon that looks vaguely like an acorn is for checking that sales tax is being applied correctly. Click on it and go in here. My items are taxable, so this drop-down needs to say sales tax applicable. Here, this tax code must be for the correct location. You must select the correct city by clicking the magnifying glass and looking it up. There are 2 scenarios. One, you have walked into a physical store, let's say Home Depot in Soquel. In that magnifying glass search box, you would search for the city of Soquel and select it. Or 2, you are ordering online and having the item shipped to your location. In that case, you search for the city that is the address of your location. Let's say Saratoga Summit Station. That station is in Los Gatos, so I would look up Los Gatos City and select it. There have been some difficulties in getting the tax to be exactly right for some purchases and locations. The current direction is, if you can't get the tax right using this tax box, enter the tax as a separate line item and leave this box as item is exempt. But if at all possible, try to get the tax correct in this box. I'm buying this in person at Westside Ace Hardware. They are in the city of Santa Cruz in Santa Cruz County. So I use this lookup and I search for Santa Cruz. It will give me every city in Santa Cruz, as well as some unincorporated areas. But I'm looking for Santa Cruz, Santa Cruz. I pick it and click OK. If you ever have any trouble getting the taxes to work out right, make sure you click Calculate SUT to force Fiscal to think and adjust this amount, as well as Refresh, which will always prod Fiscal to understand what it is you're buying. Then click OK. Go to the next icon, which looks like a form with 3 arrows coming off of it. It's called the Distributions Chart Fields icon, and here is where all those chart fields, also previously known as coding, will show up again. If you use the PO Defaults pop-up, everything here should be done for you. If you didn't, you must enter the data here. Even if you did, check to be sure that all the numbers are correct. Or perhaps you filled in all the coding except for the account coding because you're buying different types of items, which is the new object code. In that case, you would be filling it in here, making sure it's correct. When you're confident everything is the way you want it, click OK. Now you can return to the main page. I have entered one of my 2 items. I have to enter the second one as well. To get additional lines, click the plus button. It will ask you how many more rows you want. If I bought a total of 11 items, I've entered 1, I'd put 10 here to get 10 more lines, but I only need 1 more because I only bought 2 items. So I click OK. It gives me a second line. Everything I just did for the first item, I do again for the second one. I'll go through it again quickly for the sake of repetition. Item description. I can go grab my description. I cut and paste it in here. I'm only buying 1 this time. I put a 1, buying it by the each. I need a category code again. I look it up by whatever method I prefer. Then I enter the price. It's $17.99. If it were this special recycled type of purchase, I would click this and enter the data, but it's not. So I go to the chart fields. Yep, still the right location. No miscellaneous charges. I'll double check the tax. Make sure this is going to Santa Cruz, Santa Cruz. There it is. Click this button to remind Fiscal to change it. Refresh if I'm still not sure. Click OK. Double check my chart fields. Yep, there they are. Everything's okay. I return to main page. Once you've entered all your items and checked all those associated fields, believe it or not, you're done. Now you can click Save. Since this is just an example, I'm not going to click Save, but you would. Once you click Save, Fiscal will generate a purchase order ID, and it will appear up here where it currently says Next. You should save this number. Write it down, make a spreadsheet, keep track of all your purchase orders IDs, because it will follow this purchase through the approvals page, Let me try that again. It will follow this purchase through the approval stage, dispatch, and receipt or reconciliation. So you can use it whenever you need to look up your purchase order or take it through the next step in the process. Once you've clicked Save, the purchase order is saved, the number is generated, but this purchase order hasn't moved yet. It has not begun the approval process. Click on this green checkbox icon to send it off for approval. Do not click any of these other icons, only the green checkbox. This has been how to complete a basic goods purchase order with no split coding, no miscellaneous charges, and no shipping fees. Further videos or other guides that cover those cases will eventually be produced. Through the CAL FIRE intranet, you can also visit the Fiscal page here on the right-hand side under the Applications box to see many more instructional videos and documents produced to help us with our transition to Fiscal. You can also visit the CZU Finance page for additional videos on how to do the various steps in the Fiscal process.